Good evening, everyone. I'm Christina Christie. I work at Wells Fargo, manage community affairs, and we're so happy to be the sponsor tonight of tonight's event. Wells Fargo's philanthropy in Georgia. We are big supporters of housing affordability, workforce development, and adult financial literacy. But then we also are big supporters of K through 12 educational programs that tighten the achievement gap. And love this organization, and again, really happy to be here. I would like to introduce, kicking off the evening, Ed Chang, the Executive Director of Redefine Ed, Atlanta, and also Jerry Thomas, Redefine Ed Board Member. So thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Chris. All right, first, some housekeeping. This is a beautiful looking audience. I love the diversity that we see here. First things first, there are some headsets in the middle of these tables. They're probably not enough for everybody. There may be points in time where if there are people who speak Spanish, primarily, you have headsets as well as a translator that will be there to make sure that you can access the language. The other thing, there may be points where if you are a predominantly English speaker that you may or may not need that as well. So we just put those on there. Very easy to use. You just take it out of the bag, you click on to turn it on, and there's a little up and down volume button that will control your volume. So it's already programmed on the right channel, so if you need to use it, please go on ahead and do so. The other thing that there is a translator here, so this is really for the panelists. If you can speak in phrases and slow enough for a translator to be able to catch up, that would be great. So I'm going to kick it over to Jerry Thomas, who is a Redefine Ed board member real quick, and then we're going to get the show started.
Thank you, Ed. And thanks to all of you for joining us this evening. I am just delighted to be here, to be a part of a discussion on the impact of engagement on the vitality of the communities in which we live. I'm a lifetime Atlantan, seriously. Born at McLendon Hospital, never lived outside of the confines of the city limits of Atlanta in my entire life. I've always been in the city of Atlanta. And I was actually fortunate enough to experience community activism early in my life. I am a product of the Atlanta public school system. My children are products of the system. My mother was an Atlanta public schools teacher. So I graduated from what was Murphy High, that was Crim High, that's now about to become Westside Academy. Tell me how that's Westside Academy on the east side of Atlanta. Somebody's going to explain that to me. But, and I actually started and was a part of the 8th grade cohort that integrated Bass High School. So it was Bass, then Murphy. And you know, I watched as my parents, along with others, insisted that our schools be afforded the resources of other schools, recognizing that if our segregated schools could produce the products and the students and the scholars that came through those schools, what would we be if we were afforded the resources that we as citizens had a right to have? So I can remember actually on Easter Sunday, I attended with who I actually went to kindergarten with. And so in the 60th year of our birth, rather than celebrating 60 years of living, we decided to have a kindergarten reunion. There really were 40 of us who attended Wesley Avenue Elementary School. And we got together to celebrate 55 years. We had started school 55 years before. So I was with one of those one of my classmates who also was a part of the group that integrated Bass High School. And we recalled when we were in the 8th grade, and I thought about you, Beverly, because we all ate lunch at the same table in the cafeteria. And we were all pretty smart little kids. And so it was a big group of us that were in the top 10%. And I guess they still do that. I had that experience with a niece, not with either one of my children. But we were all in the top 10%, top 10%. And so we were called into the principal's office. And for the banquet every year, they put place cards on the tables for the students and their parents. And so Mr. Bennett, who was the principal, called us into the office and he said, you know, we know that you guys eat lunch together. And in the past, we've had assigned spaces for the banquet. But, you know, this year we thought that we would just allow you all to sit together. So we said, fine. We were 8th graders. And I assumed there had probably been 1 or 2 people who were in the top 10 before. But when you're talking about, there were probably every bit of 30 or 40 of us because it was 8th and 9th graders by this time. So we said, we'll let our parents know. So we go home and tell our parents, well, we're going to all get to sit together at the banquet. And our parents said, we don't think so. So we had to go back the next day and tell the principal, we don't know, but our parents said absolutely not, that would not be the case, that they want you to do whatever you normally do. And he said, well, we just won't have place cards. And so we all showed up at the banquet, and we're kids. We didn't realize our parents were activists, and were really, they were just our parents, right? So we get there, and all of us congregate together, parents and children. And so then they said, okay, everybody be seated. And you would have thought it were roaches. We just spread out. Everybody went to a different table. So that was my first experience with recognizing that my parents were advocating for my treatment and how things would happen for us in the school system, in an newly integrated school system for us. So that was activism. When my children were in school, we had good neighborhood schools. We also had magnet schools, so they went out of our neighborhood because even though I live in East Lake, they went to Mays, to the Math and Science Academy, both of them. But then there were other children who went, oh, look at you, who went to the technology magnet or the performing arts magnet. So I guess I didn't really pay attention as I should have. And then fast forward to being a part of the chamber, being a part of Beverly's term as superintendent, being a part of everything that has happened and looking around at our school system going from over 100,000 kids to 50,000 kids. The children are no longer there, and why is that? And so Ed and I talked about this. He said, well, you know, you had the white flight. I said, yeah, we had the white flight when I went to 1st grade. And our parents then bought homes, but not, no. What we're talking about there is also black flight. Mm-hmm. Because what you've had happen is you had the black middle class also leave the schools, leave the city, and relocate to the suburbs. Again, I'm an Atlanta resident, always have been, always gonna be in the city. But so there is enough, it's not just a white flight issue. It was an issue of people leaving the city and leaving a school system under-resourced with children whose parents could afford not for them to go to any other school other than the public schools. And see, when you had choice, the schools, I think, were better. Because people were there because they wanted their children to be there. And I realize we have good schools in the city of Atlanta. Please know that I'm not saying that APS schools are not good. But what I am saying is that we have left a system that is sorely needing resources. And that's not just the students in the classrooms, but also the teachers. We need to do everything we can, because without good schools, our city cannot flourish. We owe it to our children. We owe it especially to our black and brown children, because that's primarily what our system has become. We need to afford them the opportunities, and we need to think about where we live. Gentrification, I'm in the same house, you know, I'm just a creature of habit. So my neighborhood has changed. But I don't see the schools changing as quickly as the neighborhoods are changing. And it should not matter what your zip code is, the quality of the education you have. It should not matter what your zip code is, the quality of services you receive from the city. So we can fix that. And I'm so glad we're going to have a conversation tonight about what we as a collective community can do about our communities. It's not just our schools. It's where we live and where we want our children to live and where we want them to be standing 20 years from now, my grandchildren, standing 20 years from now talking about the city that they live in, the schools and the quality of the education that we afford our children. So thank you so much for being here. My story is I believe in it, and I am very, very conscious of how I spend my time. I worked for a long time, and so I now have limited time that I'm going to spend, and I get to choose that, and I choose to focus on our communities and on our children. And I think I really do. And I invite each of you to do the same. Thank you.
All right, so let me tell you a little bit about Redefine Ed Atlanta. Redefine Ed is a growing collective of civic leaders and philanthropists who are dedicated to making sure that every single child in every community having an opportunity to attend an excellent school. And so we've held now, this is our second speaker series. In our first speaker series, we talked a lot about the necessity to address issues of race and poverty as we're talking about issues of the city changing. And today we're talking about the benefits of community empowerment in order to drive equity in our city. So I've been here for the last 19 years. The last 19 years I've been here focused on education. And I've been here long enough to know just about how much I don't know about this work, but enough time to learn a few fundamental truths. First, parents always give you the best that they have. Second thing is parents really care about the following things. Is my baby safe? Is my baby loved? Is my baby happy? And then, is my baby learning? And usually in that order. And finally, parents will fight in order to get those things. And once they have them, they'll definitely fight to keep them. And so from my personal experience as a principal, if it really wasn't for parents speaking up and fighting together in the community, a school that started out like this never would have been brought back to life. And to be honest, I'm still not sure what made them sign up for a leader who looked like this at the time. I discovered these, I unearthed that picture, and I really don't know why, but I'm eternally grateful that they did. And without parent, district, and philanthropic support, that school never would have turned into this. And so whether it's education, healthcare, affordable housing, whatever the issue is, whatever the social ill is, too often it's the communities that are impacted the most that tend to have the least agency and the least voice and the least power to make those things happen. And so what we're gathered here today is to talk about and to highlight a few organizations among many around the city and around the country that are fighting to support and build power and agency within the community, whether they're cross-sector, whether they're focused on education, newly formed, to philanthropy itself. We want to bring folks together to listen and learn and to hopefully connect and engage. And so before we go there, I want to recognize who's in this room, the beautiful people in this room, and I want to pause to highlight the fact that it's not very often that we get to have this conversation in front of mixed company. And if you look around, this is one of the most diverse rooms that I've seen in a lot of different community panels and things like that. And so if you're a representative of the group that I call Please Stand Up, some of you may stand more than once as you belong to multiple groups. So parents, public advocates, please stand up and be recognized. And a special shout out goes out to you all. Yes, definitely clap. A special shout out goes out to you all. Okay. Normally in events like these, we would call out the elected officials first, but I feel like for this event, we want to make sure that we're calling out and our parents and our public advocates, right? So we do have some elected officials in the House, so thank you so much. Cynthia Briscoe Brown, at-large APS board member. Andre Pickens, Atlanta City Council, at-large. Thank you so much for your service and all that you do. Educators, school leaders, district leaders, if you could stand up and be recognized, please. Nonprofit corporate partners, including members of this year's Leadership Atlanta class. I think by law I'm supposed to say best class ever or something like that, but please stand up. Finally, philanthropic and community leaders, including any members of the Redefine Ed Board, please stand up. All right, on to the good stuff. So pull out your phone, open Twitter, introduce so our hashtag today. Put it back here. Our hashtag today is A City Changing. Once again, if we do have a translator who's translating right now, so those of you all who do need translation services, headsets are right there. I want to welcome tonight's moderator, Ayana Gabriel. Ayana is the program officer. Ayana is the program officer for the Arthur M. Blank Foundation. She's a founding board member of Redefine Ed Atlanta. She also was the former president of the Westview Community Organization and a really active leader in her community. We have Rosalia Grillier, parent leader of Kofi from Chicago, Community Organizing for Family Issues. There you go. We have Ellen Schumer, executive director and co-founder of Kofi. Ricardo Martinez, parent leader of LAPS, Latino Association for Parents of Public Schools. Lakeisha Lockard, parent leader for the Atlanta Thrive. And last and certainly not least, Janelle Williams, senior associate for the Atlanta Civic Site for the Annie E. Casey Foundation. All right, sit back, listen to the panelists, and we will reserve 20 minutes at the end for audience Q&A. We do have a large room, so just to let you know, there are note cards in the middle of your table, so if you have questions along the way or need to take notes, please feel free to do that there. There will be a moment in time when Ayana is going to ask some of us on staff to collect those. We want to make sure that we can get to enough questions as possible. This is a very large room. So thank you so much, and Ayana, take us away.
Thank you, Ed. Can everyone hear me? All right, so folks who have my microphone, I just want to make sure it's fine. Is it good now?
I don't think it's on.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, this will be it. Okay, great. So now that we are past technical difficulties, I'm so happy to see everyone here. So I was told to start with a couple minutes about why I do this work, and I'm a storyteller. So I'm going to go ahead and try that. No, that doesn't work. So I'm going to go ahead and tell a very quick story. So I live pretty close to here, about 10 minutes away, in a community called Westview, right off of Cascade. And for a number of years, I've done community work over 10 years, and including working with kids in the neighborhood. So I'm a former teacher, and I realized I've been working with youth for like the last 20 years in some capacity. So I kept on encouraging my neighbors. We have to, work with the kids outside the neighborhood, but we also need to work with them in the schools because the academics is so important. So we had one particular child who had been getting in serious trouble at the middle school. And I convinced the mom to go to a parent-teacher conference. And my first clue that something was going to be a little different than what I expected is it took a while to get her to do that. She avoided me. She counseled a couple times. And finally, I'm like, no, I was high on my horse. I was like, I was a middle school teacher. I was a high school teacher. This is what we need to do, and it'll be fine. And so we go to the school on parent-teacher day. I'm used to teaching APS. I don't know if it's still on Wednesdays, but I knew to go on that day. And we go to speak to the homeroom teacher, and there were 2 kids in there. The teacher came up to us, and she was like, well, I have 2 students. You have to wait. So we waited 10 minutes. We waited 15 minutes. Eventually, we sat on the floor, and we waited 90 minutes sitting on the floor of the dirty floor of the local middle school in my neighborhood. And at some point, about 20 minutes in, I was like, oh, I should go tell them I'm with the neighborhood association. I was like, you know what, I'm not. And I realized that I had been walking in with all my privilege and how people usually treat me, and I realized they thought I was related to the child we were coming to see. So after sitting on the dirty floor for 90 minutes, we finally got pulled into the front to speak to the administrators. And by this point, the parent was like scrunched down in her seat. I could tell she really wanted to go. And my first, besides the humiliation and anger, was guilt, because that parent had been trying to tell me, you know, I know you're telling me to go to school, but I know what's going to happen when I go to school. And, you know, I was just big-headed, and I thought I can get past that. And immediately when everybody found out that I was the president of the neighborhood association and not a family member, they switched 180 degrees. And so I remember thinking, one, I felt guilt too, because I know I had, as a teacher, I had treated parents in that way. Teaching is extremely hard. You get exhausted. There's so much you're dealing with. And I thought about all the times that there were parents that coming in the door, I was like, oh my God, here comes so-and-so's mom. And then I remember thinking, how do we get here? How is this the relationship that exists between family and schools, that when that family member comes, you let them sit on the dirty floor for 90 minutes, don't offer a chair, don't offer anything? So I'm really excited for this panel, because I know everybody on the panel are people who are trying to say, okay, no matter how we got here, we need to change and we need to go somewhere else. And so my first question is to Ricardo. What is the importance of investing in community empowerment? Why should we do it?
Bueno, antes de todo, quiero decirles gracias a todos por estar aquí con nosotros esta noche. Mi nombre es Ricardo Miguel Martínez. Yo no quiero tomar crédito por nada de lo que estamos haciendo en nuestra organización de Labs. Espero que se pongan los cabeceras para que me puedan entender. Veo que mucha gente no puede entender y me están viendo con caras de ¿qué está pasando aquí? ¿Me pueden escuchar? ¿Entienden? Tenemos una traductora inteligente, profesional allá atrás, que les va a poder decir todo lo que estamos diciendo. Una vez más, antes de todo, mi nombre es Ricardo Miguel Martínez. Yo me siento en el board, como se dice, de Labs, pero el trabajo de veras se hace con la presidenta y con el vicepresidente, que si cualquier pregunta que ustedes tienen, les digo por favor a Angélica, a Carla. La pregunta es, ¿qué se puede hacer en meter equidad en nuestra comunidad? Para empezar, la cosa más importante para una comunidad es empoderar a esta comunidad a ellos mismos. No vale la pena que alguien nos traiga una silla a la mesa si nosotros no estamos ahí para recibirla. Desafortunadamente los estereotipos en nuestra comunidad a veces son ciertos, muchas de las veces no son ciertas. Por ejemplo, podemos empezar con este ejemplo ahorita desde el principio. Muchos de ustedes, por los primeros 15 segundos, no les importó lo que yo decía porque creían que yo no podía hablar ni comunicarme con ustedes. Yo no entiendo cómo nosotros podemos tener una conversación de equidad si no podemos ni comunicarnos unos con otros. Yo siempre le digo a la gente, o estás en la mesa o estás en el menú. I'll translate that for the people that don't speak Spanish. You're either at the table or you're at the menu, on the menu, right? This is a moment that we can all sit back and say, well, what is it that we really need? We need to be invited to the conversations. We need to be empowered, right? For a lot of times, I'm going to be honest, this is a very frank, blunt conversation. Since we started going to the school board meetings, for some reason, there's a security guard by us all the time. For some reason, that security guard is always telling us to get out of the halls and not cluster together and be together in the hallways. But you want to know something odd? They don't do that to the Aramark folks that are there advocating on behalf of their multi-million-dollar contract. They're in business suits. I could be in a business suit, but I choose not to because I want to be like my parents. Again, I'm here as a business professional, entrepreneur, a parent that grew up in a very disenfranchised, very underdeserved, very impoverished, all the horrible things that you could say about the people that don't make it out. I was that. I immigrated into the United States from Mexico, from the border, from where the cartel Los Zetas is from, if that gives you any reference point. I immigrated to Northeast Texas to a poultry community with the largest poultry facility in the world 2 blocks away from my house. So I think a lot of people kind of knew what my destiny was, to take over bills, to help my mom pay for a home, to kind of inherit our parents' problems. You know, it's been a very 360 adventure for me to be involved with all this, because I think back today as an adult and I think about what happened to me in my life. I was dropped off at the bus in front of the unemployment office. We lived behind the unemployment office. I didn't know that. My mother was a positive person. She never injected any negativity into my life. So I think, you know, for us to sit here and try to solve the world's problems, it's not going to happen. All we can do is share our experiences, and I can tell you right now that I was on the bottom, the most bottom rung of whatever equity conversation that we're going to have tonight. I was at the bottom. I helped my mother translate the 4x6 that asked her if she was interested in owning her own home. At the age of 13, I helped my mother, with these hands, I helped my mother build her American dream, because we became the very first family in Northeast Texas to win or qualify for a Habitat for Humanity home. That changed the trajectory of my life. That allowed me to say, you know what, maybe I can do this college thing. Maybe there is more for me than just to go work down the street at this poultry factory. Equity was not handed to me. I have to go search for it. I had to go sign up for the military. I was a senior in high school. The day that I signed up for the military, I said, man, I got this thing figured out. I'm going to go to Texas A&M. I'm going to pay for my university. And then a week later, the planes fell into, and 9/11 became 9/11. I was in like pre-calculus class, algebra class, geometry class. And I was watching the planes crashing into the buildings, and I'm thinking to myself, well, there goes my American dream. I'm going to go fight, and I'm going to lose my life helping other people with their American dream. And that's the story of a lot of people of color. It's a very tricky conversation about what is equity in our communities, because for everybody it's different. I think if there had been equity in my situation, I probably wouldn't have had to depend on Jimmy Carter and the Habitat for Humanity program for me to get out of my situation. I think that college would have been a lot easier for me, and I wouldn't have been thinking during calculus and physics classes, am I going to go to war? Am I going to die? Is this the end of what this is about? There are a lot of stereotypes, and again, I say that, and we did that on purpose, because a lot of you guys didn't really care to put on your translation services stuff. You kind of just were okay with me talking, and you really didn't know what was really going on, and that hurt. And I say that because if that happens here in this controlled environment, what happens every single day of our families' lives? You know, we have been, as children, advocates for our parents since we were little kids. They used to take us out of the schools, to take us to the doctor's offices, to do the tax assessing, to pay our bills, to make sure that the water wasn't cut off. All of these things that no child should ever be placed in. And how many times do we see our parents advocating for our kids? So again, equity means a lot of different things for a lot of different people. And a lot of people will be quick to say, well, that guy's an activist. I am not an activist. I am not against anything. I am for things. I am an advocate. I am for the future of this country. I am for empowering our kids. I am for our teachers and our language services to get paid what they should be paid. I am for, if we are 10% of this population, then give us 10% of the resources. I'm not asking, I'm not begging for anything. I'm asking what we are entitled to. So equity it's a tricky conversation, but if we can all bring our shared experiences together, I think it starts a narrative that we can all keep going and keep pushing this ball up the hill.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Ellen and Rose, the next question is for you. So you've been doing community organizing for some time. What do you see as possible when you empower parents?
Everything. Hello, beautiful people. We're going to keep it real tonight, or we're just going to sit here and bore each other? Can we keep it real? Okay. And I have a big mouth, so just probably turn mine down a little bit. Everybody can hear me, right? Okay. So if I might just share a little bit of my story. Once upon a time, this young lady was diagnosed to die from stage 4 cancer all over my body. But God reminded me, as as all of us, have a purpose. And my purpose hadn't been fulfilled yet. And through systems, and again, I can relate to coming from the poorest of the poor and the ones who get the scraps after the scraps have been dabbled through. And such was the community that I lived in, trying to raise my daughters in systems that just weren't working. The educational system wasn't working well for them. Then myself, even in the middle of my dying, there are systems that are predicating on me. You can't even die in peace. You know what I'm saying? And so in that, I understood I was forced to go to a mandatory meeting in order to even get my medicine so I could move toward dying. And then and to get my housing at the time, because I had previously been a banker, but cancer kind of cancels everything. And so I got into this really deep depression and felt like all hope was gone, as do many of our, well, they say low-income communities. I choose to call them challenged communities, are experiencing. Your issues that you're facing just to survive are overwhelming within themselves, and then to have the weight of systems and policies and how you can raise your children and what you can do and how much you can eat and where you can stay, all of these things that are human rights. We all have the right to live our best life. And so I was faced with a depression and having all of these things on me. But in this mandatory meeting, and I want to remind you all that all things work together for your good if you love him. I'm going to leave that there. But he proved that to me. So I'm in this meeting, and mind you, at that time, my depression had me eat myself up to over 486 pounds. I was in a wheelchair. I was angry. I did not want to be there. But God had Kofi there. And Kofi challenged me in my anger. And they said, set some goals. And I'm like, y'all better get out of my face. I'm dying. What I care about setting some goals? But this is what we don't look at. We just say what we think people should do, how they should live, what should be sufficient for their survival, and we don't know their story. And I want to encourage everybody. I know we're not at this part, but I kind of just roll how my heart feels. But I want to encourage everybody, before you start making judgments and decisions over human beings, get to know them. And so that's what Kofi brought to my face. They were like, well, okay, so maybe you are dying, but you said you love your girls. You said you don't trust anybody to raise them. So maybe you could put some things in place that'll help them in case you do expire, like that can of soup they described you as. And then my journey really began. I started doing things like just cutting off pop, eating better, actually keeping my appointments, actually taking my medicine. And that feels like nothing to you, I can imagine. But to me, it was the reason I'm here today. Those little things, we impose these big things on people. We walk around in our grandeur when people aren't there yet, and it's still our responsibility to help them get there. And so I started setting goals, and pretty soon it became from that wheelchair to the White House. And I've been all over this country to share my story, but to share the power that we all have in us, the leadership that we all have in us. So how do we bring equity? Well, we've done it by, first of all, Kofi stands for Community Organizing and Family Issues, because I hate for people to name all these letters over my head and I don't know what they're talking about. And Power Pack, so I'm the co-president now of Kofi Power Pack Illinois. Power Pack are those very same parents that Kofi has trained in their model, which works. I'm a living witness, and so are countless other African American and Latina mothers predominantly. But we also have sprinkles of dads in there, and granddads and grandmoms, and everybody's welcome. It's a multicultural organization. But those very same parents go on to be advocates for themselves, their family, and their community. and they do so through Power Pack, Parents Organized to Win, Educate and Renew Policy Action Council. And we have 5 campaigns, which I'm sure we'll get to sometime through this, because I want somebody else to go. Y'all, I can go, because I mean this. I've lived this, and I'm passionate about it, so y'all just wink at me when I need to stop, okay? Mhm. Mhm.
Let me just start by building off of what Rose already started, which is um, we have a 3-phase, sort of multifaceted parent leadership and organizing model that really starts with parents where they're at. So um, we have now engaged probably 4,000 or 5,000 parents, mostly in Chicago, but across the state of Illinois. And we've gone into daycare centers, and we've gone into the Chicago Public Schools, and we've gone into public housing projects and social service agencies, which is how we ended up running into Rose. Sometimes we're invited by the agency partners. Sometimes parents themselves have found a way to get us invited into their schools or into their child care centers. They hear about the work word of mouth. But they come in the door, and the very first thing that we really look at is um, sort of visions for the parents' visions for themselves as a person, and their visions for their families, and then their visions for their communities, and linking that sort of sense of hope and goal setting to some very practical, what are some baby steps you can take to start to move your goals forward. And you spoke earlier about the mom that was, didn't want to go into the school because they knew, what they were going to experience there. And there's just
so much, people don't want to take the first step because they've been shot down so many times. So part of the first phase of the goal setting and the taking those baby steps is what we call building a web of support. It's a lot about building relationships among the parents, the mostly mothers themselves, but also helping them build stronger relationships in their lives with their family members and their neighbors and their and ultimately with their schools and in the systems that they're engaged. So phase 1 we call self, family, and team. Phase 2 is where parents start to, and part of team is to work together on a team goal. And those team goals are a lot of times very much about the immediate. We need a playground. We need a safe passage to the school. We want a workshop on domestic violence. We want a workshop resources, connection to a bank or financial empowerment services. Something very short-term and practical that the team then leads, whether it's 10 parents, whether it's 20 parents, whether it's 12. They work together to achieve that goal. And having achieved the goal, they begin to think, going back to those visions, what can be done? So it's incremental, it values parents where they're at, it sends the message that everybody, what did you say, everyone can live their best lives. I say phase one is sort of the Oprah of the Kofi model. And at that point, parents then start to really intentionally learn and think about building relationships with everybody in the community. So the gangbangers on the corner, the business people who run the corner liquor store, the teachers in the school, the elected officials, the neighbors who live upstairs and downstairs and maybe they haven't met before. And there's basically a community outreach effort that involves listening and telling stories and sharing stories. That happens with at least 100 different people in the community for each team. And parents begin to set goals, then bigger goals, and involve the stakeholders in the community on those goals. And sometimes playgrounds and school improvements and after-school programs really parents have been able to succeed and get those things in their schools through their own advocacy and through those partnerships. But really, phase three, I think, is what you're asking about, which is when parents have achieved the change in their community and begin to work across the system, across the whole Chicago Public Schools. I'll turn it over to Rose and let her tell those stories.
And now that the parents that have become part of Power Pack Illinois, and it's across the state, then we have what is called Moms on a Mission, where we have a whole legislative docket or a whole list of bills that we want legislators to either support or not support. And we all pack up in buses and we go to Springfield and we present that legislative docket. But it doesn't end there, because all throughout we're calling on folks in the community and in our different branches to call their legislators and ring it in their ear. This needs to happen. But when we go to Springfield, we take these personal impact stories. We say, this is what this piece of legislation is doing to me, has done to my community or whatever. Because again, you have to bring the human to it. People look at numbers, and numbers are fine. For you number lovers, I'm not hating. But it is not actually me. And you could say 20% of the people in Inglewood, which is where I'm from, have this issue. But you might have only interviewed 2 people out of 100 people. That's still your 20%. But does that really speak for 100 people? And so for us to come, a real person with real feeling, with a real story, and share that, oftentimes, to be honest with you, legislators don't really know what's going on in real life on the street. And so we're bringing that to them. And they want to know oftentimes. But here's the important part of our success in all of our campaigns. And I feel like I really quickly need to name them. We have our elementary justice campaign, where we look at the school to prison pipeline, push-outs and expulsions and arrests in our Black and brown schools that are disproportionate, why our children aren't thriving or their academic scores are low. Then we have our early learning campaign, which looks at everything to do with early education, child care, all of that kind of hot mess, making sure those systems work together. I don't have enough time to tell y'all the good success stories in here, so I'm just speed dialing through it, and I hope you can translate as fast as I talk. But we also have our Stepping Out of Poverty, which is my heart, where now we're working on the boots and tickets and fees and fines, and we've called all the department heads together, and we got a champion city clerk, and y'all gonna we the second one in the country to do it other than San Francisco, and it's gonna be fat. Y'all keep looking on the radar for that one. But we look at children's savings accounts in there, children having a start. something inspired for. We want the state to invest in them when they're born. Set up that account. Let grandma, auntie, everybody invest in it. It's building the mentality of hope for that child that something is happening for me to be able to go to college. But it is also some behind there to help them go to college by the time they get that age. And the last campaign is Recess Health and Food, which looks at food disparities and health in the community.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for painting that picture, because I asked you to do that. I asked you to paint a picture, because a lot of times people talk about organizing, and it's this general thing, and nobody knows what does it look like. And so I'm interested, hearing what's happening in Chicago, to all my Atlanta panelists, Ricardo, Lakeisha, Janelle, what does the Atlanta context look like for organizing? What's similar, what's different?
I mean, I can tell you a few wins that we've had as an organization that I don't look at it as organizing. I think it is just connecting with people and like advocating for things, right? That empower us and that show my kids that, hey, my daddy was involved in that. Maybe I should do something too that's just as powerful. So as an organization, we've been existed for about a year and a half. We advocated and we partnered with the only Latinx honorary name park in the state of Georgia, which is the Sarah J. Gonzalez Park. We're a partner in that, and we helped with the community garden. And what that did is that empowered a community that was getting ready to get kicked out, that supposedly got taken out of a food desert, but they built the Publix, and because the property owner thought that the Publix was enough, he started raising the rent with cockroaches, green pools, molded, just horrible situations. That's one of the first things that we got involved with. We recently won the Superintendent's Family Engagement Leadership Award. So that's a check mark on our side. That gives us a little bit of validation that what we're doing is working. We train and we partner up with the Mexican consulate. We partner up with APS and we bring training to our parents so that they are aware. One of the biggest things that's going on through our school system right now is a system of excellence schools. System of excellence schools is very important right now in APS. If a school is failing, there's nothing that holds it accountable to say these are the parameters that you have to adhere to bring your school out of failing to be passing. We automatically say, well, that school is failing, and if you guys don't get your failure rates up, we're going to close you down and you're going to go into another school, or we're going to turn you into a charter school. It's not very fair. I wouldn't like it if my job moved buildings and I had to get in traffic. So I imagine a lot of those parents don't appreciate that either, especially when these principals are working so hard to make a connection with this local community. So again, there's what huge organizations like Kofi are doing, but then there's also the grassroots, which is a lot of the stuff that's kind of shifting back into our field is you got to know how to organize your most basic on the ground folks, the people that are suffering every single day, the people that are coming home with failing report cards. I'll give you guys a perfect example. My child is 3 years old. We pay a lot of money to send him to an academy. We recently noticed that he was going backwards in his vocabulary. He was always ahead by a lot. And then we started noticing he was going backwards, and we asked, what's happening? And the headmistress was saying, oh, well, he's not old enough to be in the 3- and 4-year-old classes, so he's with the 2-year-olds. My child is 3. He had been 3 for 2 months. She didn't even know how old he was. So we asked if we could get an assessment done on him to see where he was on their scale. I need a curriculum. I need to know what's going on with my child. They came back to me with a piece of paper with about 5 missing blanks and about 3 or 4 numbers, and they said, your child is not up to par with other 3-year-olds with letters and numbers. And I looked at that person, I said, and where on that assessment did you guys test for my child's complete vocabulary of the Spanish language? My child is trying to learn in 2 different languages. He gets Spanish at home, and then I bring him here, and you guys are telling me he's an idiot. If that's happening at a place that we're paying X amount of dollars at, what's happening in our schools where you're taking out of our tax money and our property dollars? So organizing is not just what we think back in the days. We got to get smarter. You guys got to understand, these rules and these budgets are getting done in boardrooms, with business suits, with things being chartered, brokered, and given back and forth. They're not being done, and I apologize if I offend anyone. This is Atlanta. This is the birthplace of civil disobedience. We're 50 years down the road from that, and we're still fighting for the same shit.
So
If that
Ricardo,
doesn't scare you
yeah.
into getting involved, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, that's actually a perfect segue on what you just said, because part of what you're talking about is where does the power lie and where do the resources go? So we'll turn to you now. All of this requires resources. And so we are both in philanthropy, and I'm just going to be blunt. Thank you, Ricardo. Philanthropy does not like funding organizing. It seems touchy-feely, but we don't do it. Why is that?
Why philanthropy does not like to fund organizing. That's opening the gates, and so the flood is going to happen. I'd like to encourage everyone to read National Committee for Responsive Philanthropy issued a report on Atlanta as the South grows bearing fruit. Tony Trailer from the Candida Fund was featured in the report, along with several other organizers, Southerners on New Ground, the Georgia Latino Alliance for Human Rights, Racial Justice Action Center, several groups doing fascinating work. And what we found in the Atlanta philanthropic market is that only 2% of investments go to organizing. 2%. And so budgets reflect values. That's the reality. And what you budget is a reflection of what you value. And you know, this brings us to something that Dr. King challenged us to think about. Eradicate the structures, systems, and practices that necessitate philanthropy. That's really what equity is about. That's really what it demands. And so philanthropy has to invest in organizing so that we can fundamentally, responsibly, and sustainably support communities that are here to thrive. And so I want to put some frame on that 2% data point. I want to put some frame on our budgets, our values, and really lift up what we're really tackling here and to really call it. We have to call race. So I don't want to only say equity, I want to say racial equity. We have to center this on racial equity. We are talking about Black and brown communities. We're talking about Black and brown communities that have been extracted for generations and continue to be exploited through the prison system and through comparable systems that set people up for failure. And that is what we are talking about. So when we're thinking about investing in organizing, this is not just a checklist process. This is a complicated, nuanced, but necessary path, not only for communities of color, but for our shared freedom, for our shared future. This is about supporting parents so that they can make their informed choices. This is about supporting parents so they lead their agenda, not guiding parents for them to support an agenda that we already have. If we really, really trust people to lead their lives, we will understand our role is to support them. And I want to unpack that with a story of a dear friend of mine. I'll call her Jennifer. This happened on Friday. I was, working from home. Jennifer calls me. Jennifer works 2 jobs, 7 days a week. It's pouring. You remember, it was pouring Friday, thunderstorms. Jennifer dropped off her daughter. Her daughter attends my daughter's school. She got in a car accident, and the first question she asks is, could you pick up my daughter? Sure, I'll get your daughter. Then I continue to probe, where are you? What's going on? I'm stranded. My car won't start. I leave my house, get to Jennifer. She is soaking wet in the rain, trying to get on to her insurance company, but she doesn't have good signal because she's under a tree. It's terrible weather. Rush Jennifer to the pharmacy because she's in pain. take off clothes off my back to give to Jennifer because she's drenched. And Jennifer says, I need to get to work. And I protest, but Jennifer says, I need to get to work. I take her home, still protesting. She hops in her mom's car and she goes to work. Gets to work and they tell her, your arm is fractured. Jennifer asks me to watch her daughter for the weekend because she still has to work. So when we talk about parents, we're talking about some resilient, creative people. Our responsibility is not to pathologize them. Our responsibility is not to be a charity. Our responsibility is to level the playing field. Our responsibility is to call out structural racism and the intersection of systems that create realities. And I'm going to wrap up. But we need to invest in organizing. If we don't invest in organizing, we're investing in toxic charity. And that's something we should be accountable for. Because if our region isn't competitive, our children wouldn't be competitive. We won't have a future to look forward to. And we need to name these issues. We have to tackle these issues. We need to understand the intersection of education, workforce, health, and housing and transit. That creates our shared lived experiences. And so let's continue having these conversations. Let's continue working ourselves out of a job because children deserve it.
Thank you. So let me give a reminder about Q&A because we're about to turn to Q&A. So we have plenty of opportunity to continue this conversation. But if you haven't written your question down already, can somebody hold up what the question cards look like? They look like this, and we're going to roll into this in about 5 or 10 minutes. So if you have questions for the panel, this would be a good time to write down. So my last question before Q&A, which is for everyone. We talk a lot about relationships and the need of relationships and that being the first step. And then a lot of what we're talking about is collective action and the power in numbers. So we have a number of people in this room. Mm-hmm. So I want each of the panelists to be able to give a call to action. And I'm going to name some of the groups, and you can choose the group that you feel most comfortable with. So we have parents, I was in this room, and families. What is their call to action? Community members, civic leaders and nonprofit leaders. I'll include the elected officials in there. Education professionals, and funders in the business community. So I'm going to start with Lakeisha, because you haven't had as much of a chance to speak. For any one of those groups, what would be your one call to action?
Okay, so for parents, if you are tired of advocating by yourself, if you don't know how to advocate and you want to advocate, if you want to be empowered and find your voice, you can actually meet someone in a purple shirt, Lana Thrab, after this is over. And when it comes to, you said civic leaders, right? Okay, so I know there's some lawmakers in the room, right? Okay. So so for the lawmakers, what we need for you to do is respond to our phone calls, respond to our emails, respond to our texts, and also create laws that will enable our children to have a quality education. And when it comes to, I know there's some board members in the room too. When it comes to the board members, we would like a seat at the table, and we would like to actually collaborate with you to make sure that our district is perfect for our children to have a quality education. And when it comes to the funders, we want you to believe in our work and trust us and support us.
There you go.
Any other panelists? Let's go down who have it. Call to action.
I'd like to encourage funders to really think about their investment strategy in a dynamic way. You know, I'm a researcher by training, so I love data. And it's really easy, it's very clean, it's very methodical to invest in evidence-based practices because you could quickly extract what's the ROI. but that's actually not going to move the needle. We cannot program our way out of poverty. We cannot program our way out of generations of structural racism. So we have to invest in innovative and bold strategies that actually give power to community to lead their agenda. And you cannot do that by investing and building in the infrastructure that doesn't reflect the communities you're actually trying to work on behalf of. So interrogate what is the composition of the institutions you're investing in. And not only what does it look like at a board level, what does it look like with roles with decision-making authority? That's our responsibility, that's our accountability, and we want to make sure that when time's up, we know what side of history we're recorded on.
So I think the lowest hanging fruit would be to come on my knees and ask you to donate some money. But I'm not going to do that because, to be honest with you, all the work that we've been able to accomplish up to this point, we haven't asked anybody for a dollar. Everything that we get in, even in our partnership with Redefined Ed, 100% of all the money that comes in goes directly into our organization. We don't take salaries. Everything is volunteer work. It's to pay for Uber rides. It's for training. It's to pay for babysitting for the parents. I think that the beautiful thing about what we have going on is we are a 501c3 organization. We are not a charity, right? We are an organization that values your money and your time. So that heads into the next thing. We're using 100% of our funds to be able to do the small amount of things that we're doing to do our part. We recently just advocated at the school board meetings and were able to get the language policy changed for the APS public school system. Everything that goes out has to be in English and in Spanish. That's a great first step. And again, we did that with a $6,000 budget. We started doing that with a $0 budget. Mm-hmm. So, you know, take 2 or 3 Starbucks off this week and send it over our way. I'm telling you, it'll be very well spent. The most important thing that I could ask you for, and for this I will grovel on my knees, is your time. You know, like, I didn't think that I would be advocating for anything other than my own self-interest. My mom laid the foundation for me. And I did not think that I would be sitting here on this panel talking about my personal experiences, but I've told everybody here, like, if I rode off into the sunset in a drop-top convertible and waved to everybody because I made it, I'm going to have a reality check in a few years, and it's really going to bother me that I didn't do more when I could do more. So if you're an accountant, I need help getting people in Uber rides so they're accounted for at our school board meetings. If you are a sanitation worker, we're taking a different strategy to do Latino-inspired Mother's Day dances, Father's Day dances, Dia de los Niños. We need people to help us change the trash cans. Like, it's not that hard. And I'm telling you guys, like, I might be passionate about what I'm doing, but I really am coming to this as a business person. I'm telling you guys right now, we are projected to be the majority minority by 2050. We have the largest disparity wage gaps of any other people of color. If you think for a second that we are going to be able to maintain this lifestyle that we enjoy today in the future, you are sorely mistaken. Strawberries will cost $5. Milk will cost $10. Lettuce will cost $10. Avocados already cost $1.50 out of season. It's getting harder to enjoy avocado toast.
Oh, yes.
And I'm telling you guys, you have to empower us, because otherwise you can't empower 50 million people that work in the agriculture field. They don't even make overtime. These institutions have been around for over 100 years. We don't even shop the way we used to do 100 years ago. Like, things are changing. We have to change with the times. We were not at the table when these things were created. We have no equity invested in it. All we're asking for is give us a seat at the table. Reach out to us. Help us.
So my call to action is to build off of a little bit of what Ed said, which is keep coming together across difference. One of the things we didn't really highlight in our work, but in Chicago, our schools are they're about 45% African American, 45% Latino, and 10% white, and with it being very segregated across the city. But the voice of Black and brown parents was not, at the Board of Education and being heard for many, many years because people were being, split and fighting with one another instead of working together. And there's so much opportunity. And so what we've done at Kofi, we work in communities and in schools that are segregated. So we start with people where they're at, but we encourage people to come together. We do translation, and we make sure every single word is translated back and forth, even if it takes twice as long. And people get to hear each other's stories, get to know each other, and those are some of the parent leaders that are on the governing council that Rose is the president of. And you get a sense of the way people have really unified and have built some power and are making a difference. Get together across race, across communities, but also get together across the silos that divide us. And even if it's, make an effort to have some conversations with some of the parents here. If you're not out in the community, if you're out in the community, make an effort to have a conversation with the elected officials and the funders, and keep, open up those lines of communications and relationship building. That's my call to action.
Thank you.
Okay, real quick. So my thing for everybody is do something. Either you're a part of the problem or you're part of the solution. Okay, but to pick on a couple of people just because I love you so much. If you're a parent, make an effort. We know y'all bad. We know you rule the world. You make everything happen. You make $1 out of 15 cents. But find out what's happening in your community. Find out who's coming together to do something and help them do it. Find out who you need to call about change and what you need to change. I'm going to stop picking on y'all. If you're a funder, of course, give us some money. We're never going to turn that down. But stop wasting your money. Stop pouring your money into something that the numbers look good, but ain't nothing changing. And put your money into the people who are living what you're actually trying to change. Because guess what? This real booklet, and go on our web, everybody, this is what you can do. Go on our website, Kofi at KofiOnline.org. We make a publication for every campaign that we've had victories in because we want to share the learnings, because we don't want this just to happen in Chicago and Illinois. We want this to happen across the country, and my motto is I want it to happen worldwide. And these folks, this publication is actually called Ask the Expert, because they are the experts. Parents and community are the experts on what is going to solve the problems and challenges in their community. So stop wasting money on flying somebody in from West Hill to tell you something that they read 12 years ago and they just redepicted it and work with in relationship, not fighting against. We build a relationship with everybody. Legislators, those people who you see most people going down there to the board meeting and knock them in the head. No, we build relationships with them, because if you're to actually get something done, you have to do it together. A house divided will not stand, and that goes for this country too. It's divided right now. Now, for funders, I want to also say to you, I'm not mad at you, because I know you got a big old plate right now. And you need a side plate because it's overflowing. This country is dysfunctional at this time. And it did just start. It's been brewing for a long time. But what you can really do is build relationships with your folks that you are funding. Know them. Don't just give them some money because you heard something about them or you read something that sounds felt. Work with them. And then say, what can I do in addition to the money? How else can I help you? Who can I connect you with? What can I do? All of those things that, what happened? Oh, okay. All of those things that go beyond just the money. Help build them so that they can help build others. And one thing I like that CFW does, it brings its fundees together to collaborate together. Because we might work on, let's just say, the school to prison pipeline, but they might be working on the step right before there. And if we work together, it's one child, y'all. Everybody in this room, it's one child. It's not a 0 to 5 and then a 3 to 4 year old and then a middle school. And it's the same child. You can't fund one piece of a child. Fund the whole child. I'm done. I'm done.
All right, Rose. Okay.
And love everybody. Yeah.
So thank you. We're gonna get some Q&A, and I'm just gonna roll through them quickly. We have about 10 questions. So I would say, answer if you feel it's on your heart. So, what are your suggestions for helping teachers learn how to better engage parents authentically?
Teachers, a lot of times I know teachers feel as though that a parent is a threat, but we actually want to work with you. We actually want to partner with you to help our child. So be parent friendly, first of all, when we come up to the school, and then maybe listen to us, that maybe get to know us first of all, so that you can get to know the child. Take the time out to get to know the parent in order for you to collaborate to work better for that child.
One other thing I'll add, unless you cut me off, but the parents came up with an idea in some of the schools that we worked with where they would find a time and space to get together with the teachers outside of parent-teacher conferences or official school open houses, and just share stories and get to know one another. The parents really led the conversation, but it took us a while to get it all together and then to convince the school to do it. It wasn't a huge amount of time. It was a half hour or 45 minutes, but there were teachers crying and parents crying and really hearing what's going on in the community in a different way. It was a powerful idea. So.
I'd like to take a crack. There's a quote that I steal from my friend all the time. She writes me, "We are the children of those who chose to survive." Julie Dash. We are not a threat to anybody, man. I would much rather be spending my time with my 2 children and raising them. I didn't have a father. So I'm trying to do everything that I can for my 2 kids because I didn't have that. We are not the problem. We are the solution. We are representing the people that have had enough. That whole, you get tired of being sick and tired, that's what we have. If you are a person of color or you're a minority, someone in this country has advocated for you in the past. And if it's that hard for you to advocate for anybody else behind you, then maybe this is not the work for you. That's just a fact. She said it earlier, you're either part of the problem or you're part of the solution. You either want to get involved or you keep telling yourself that you're going to get involved eventually. At some point or another, you just see too much and you're exposed to too much that you just say, I cannot stay silent anymore. I have to get involved. I have to do something in my community. That's why we're here. It's not because there was nothing else available or this was online or it was on Indeed.com. We went in, we said, what can we do? How can you use us? So again, we're in front of you and saying let's do this, man. We've been doing this long enough. Let's just get a little bit smarter. And I would hope that when we go to the board meetings, that they don't put the translator in the back and the reception cuts out. I would hope that the security guard that's getting paid to be there doesn't tell me that I need to keep my emotions in check. My mother abandoned us for a very long time so that she could go study to be a bilingual dyslexia teacher. In my hometown, there is a buddy bench that they built in my mother's honor. Whenever someone doesn't have a friend, they can sit there and they know to come and be a friend to them. It doesn't take a lot. It takes very, very little, but it takes a lot of people coming together to do very little.
All right, thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna ask a question. I'm gonna point to you. In the changing city as a parent, who has my back? I think this is for the Atlanta people.
What'd you say? I'm sorry.
In a changing city as a parent, who has my back?
Atlanta Thrive. And I'm going to tell you why. Because, and I still want to piggyback off that last question, because a lot of times, some of our parents can't read and write, or they struggle with reading and writing. Some of our parents have not graduated from high school. So they may struggle with helping their child. Yeah. So you as an educator, That's why I say get to know your parent, because you don't know. They might not know how to help their child. They may only know to come up to fuss at you because they're frustrated. So, and yes, Atlanta Thrive, because we empower parents to disrupt inequities in education. But not only that, we engage them. So we create relationships with them. We also empower them to find their voice, like I have one right now. And also we educate them. We educate them on coming and talking to the educators in a civil way and trying to find a medium to where you can help your child succeed.
I'll say one thing, I'm sorry. There's something that probably a lot of people in this audience don't know. Where we come from Latin America, education is revered at the same level as religion. So for us to ask these parents to come and engage and to speak to their teachers or to go to the boardroom, you're asking for them to question everything of their existence, And that's probably a tidbit you guys have never learned before. It is a very scary thing for you to go and question a teacher or question a school board that you're not getting what you're supposed to be getting. So keep that in mind as well. Like, we're not trying to be hostile. We're not trying to be abrasive. We just don't know any better.
Thank you. All right, so this is for the organizers. Have you been or do you feel equipped to address racist and classist systems and policies along with your organizing? Or is it already embedded in your training and activities?
Our answer might be too long. Simple answer is yes, yes, no, and yes.
Say more. Say more.
Because my consciousness grows daily, because I'm also one of the founding members and on the governing council of UPlan, which is a national organization of parent organizations that are bad, capital A, just like Kofi is, all over the country that are working on some of these same issues, but they've come together from a national level to address, you got the ground, you got the, see, all of it got to, do all that. But I've become more conscious of how all of the woes, every one of the woes that we're talking about have a racial inequity, and that ain't even the way I want to describe it, but for sake of time, that's what we'll say. Framework, intentional framework. So yes to all of that, but no, because just like I've been empowered, I really do go all over this country telling parents everywhere, you a leader, you was born one. Now just find out what your particular area of expertise is within that, and see, I'm gonna keep on doing that until he say, okay, you tired, sit down and it's over. And the more I do that, the more I know it's gonna happen. It's building, it's brewing, and the people who think they're making it worse are actually making it better because they're forcing us to come together on some respect. So that's why I say yes, yes, and no.
All right, I was given the hard task of one more question, even though we have a number here. So I'm going to end on this question. I'm sorry, cards are going flying everywhere. What is the good news?
Well, I got a short answer this time. We still breathe. Yeah. And as long as we still breathing, we have another. That's why I'm like this, y'all. I'm so happy to be alive. I'm so happy that he didn't take me when they was telling me that he was going to take me. And so every day I'm happy. I don't care what's going on. So long as we breathing, long as we're still here, there's opportunity.
I'd like to add that the good news is we can't run anymore. And it's uncomfortable, but it's necessary news. And I don't know if it's good news, but it's necessary news. We have to have uncomfortable conversations. And we have to really, as parents, my accountability is my child. And when she asks me at the end of the day, Mommy, did you act in a way that you'd be proud to be my mommy today? Because I asked her to. It's a tough conversation, right? And so the necessary news is that we are forced in these times to reckon with who we are.
Yeah.
And Atlanta is forced to ask a question: what's our identity? Are we really that Black Mecca? Are we number one for income inequality? Do we fake it till we make it? Or are we really going to be the city too busy to hate? And that's a question we are confronted to have to answer now. That's the good news.
Well, and I'll say, I think good news is that when people come together, things are changing. That we got rid of zero tolerance in the discipline code and brought restorative justice practices into Chicago. We got the state's early learning council to create a new family advisory committee that's going to really bring parents to the table so that parent voice is part of early learning policy and systems decision making. We brought recess back to Chicago Public Schools. It's ridiculous to think about it, and at this point, we already have new parents coming in who'd say, we had no recess? I don't even believe you. But we had 82% of Chicago Public School students didn't have recess in their school day, just 15 years ago when we started working on the campaign, and then 7 years ago brought recess back. So things are changing. Right now in Chicago, we just elected 3 public officials to lead the city of Chicago. 2 African-American women and a Latina woman are the leaders. And they are putting racial equity right at the front and center of their leadership. Ana Valencia, who's the current city clerk who just won re-election, is who Rose was talking about. We have created a fines, fees, and access collaborative with her. And when I say we, I mean the parent leaders of PowerPack have sat down with her and are now about to release, as soon as the new mayor takes office, May 20-something, it's about a month away, we're going to release the recommendations with the city clerk that are to massively change the city fees and fines, to stop people from having their driver's licenses taken away and their cars impounded and then sold for scrap, and all kinds of consequences of, having a parking ticket that's $100 and then doubles to $200, or not being able to afford a city sticker. Some of the additional fees will be reduced. There'll be hardship options for families that can't afford it, including we're making sure undocumented families are included in the hardship definition. And so things are happening, change is happening, and the election of a new set of leaders across our state, and our city council, we have 6 socialists, Democratic socialists, that have been elected to the city council in the last round of elections, mostly Bernie Sanders type organizers out of 50. So there's a bunch of things that are happening, and a lot of it is due to the grassroots activism of parents and other community members who've been out there pounding the pavement around police brutality, around school inequities, around health issues and immigration. So that's good news.
I would say the good news is that we're here tonight, gathered, talking about something very uncomfortable. I've always said, and I didn't know this before, that the most powerful thing that I have encountered is being in a group of allies that when you say, man, there's a racial inequity, they don't look at you and say, well, you're part of the problem. Instead, they're like, no, we're here for a solution. And I think that's been the most overwhelming for me, because where I come from, things like this don't happen. People don't care about what things like that we have to say. So the fact that, to Rose's point, that there's been things and situations and circumstances that have made us so uncomfortable to the point that we're here now, this movement is not going to die long after we're gone. People will still be fighting for these things. I'm thankful for Donald Trump. I am very thankful for him because I told my wife, I cried the night that he got elected, and she said, why are you crying? I said, because I don't think I can ever express to you all the hard shit that I've had to deal with in my life, that when I see this man elected, like it just throws everything out the window, and none of those things matter. And that man forced me to go and vote for the first time in my life. I'm sad to say I didn't even vote when Barack Obama was running for office. It wasn't, that wasn't enough. That wasn't enough for me. I don't know why. And you want to know why? Because I had no equity in the game. I didn't own a house. My taxes were filed on easy online, 1040, whatever. I didn't have kids. I didn't understand why the things happened the way that they happened to me. Like I had no equity in my own life, I guess, really, if we're going to be honest about it. So I didn't know how it affected me. And now that these things have happened, the fact that they're locking my people up in cages like dogs, and there's no way that I'm going to sit back and let that happen, that is the good news.
So the good news is that first of all, we're having this conversation. And second of all, we're paying attention and we're acting on it. And then that parents are finding their voices and we're finding a way to do what we've been wanting to do for such a long time.
All right, let's give a hand to our wonderful panel, please. Yes, thank you. And so Ed's gonna close us out. But before we do that, can we give a hand to the panel? Thank you.
Yes.
All right, so I have the unenviable position to try to close this out. It is 8:30 almost on a school night, so I want to make sure that we get you out at the right time. So, you know, it's always great to be in a crowd like this, and I feel like if we're gonna address those core issues in our city, whether it be education or whether it be any of the other social ills, we have to do it together. And we need to work with and empower our communities more. Our school district, our board members, our school district employees can't change the system on their own. Our mayor and our city council, they can't address the other ills of the city on their own. It's going to take a lot of people to make this happen. And so, you know, I wrote a bunch of quotes that really struck me tonight. You know, you have to bring the human into it. This is Atlanta, the birthplace of civil disobedience. Budgets reflect values, and we have to call and center this around racial equity. Our responsibility is to level the playing field and call out structural racism. One thing, Janelle, that you said that struck me, and I hadn't heard this before, is if we aren't investing in organizing, we are investing in toxic charity. And I hadn't ever heard that before, but it just really made me reflect. It made me think about you know, our organization, partner organizations and things like that, and how we're approaching the work and what we're doing within the work, and how we're partnering together. And so thank you for that, for you, all of you all as a panel. And so if you're sitting here in the room today, I have to believe that it means that you have an interest in the community, in education, our collective city's children, you know, and the future of the city, and that you all can be part of the solution. We heard different ways that you can get engaged, you know, from funding to listening and building relationships to getting seats at the table, you know, making time, you know, if you're an elected official, making time for folks who are on the ground, things like that. Joining the PTO and the GO team, you know, there's lots of ways that people can get involved. And I think Rose said it, it's just do something, right? Like
Yes.
Wherever it takes you, doing nothing isn't an option anymore, right? Like I have to believe that we're sitting here today, we're listening to the conversation. So at the end of this night, doing nothing shouldn't be an option anymore, right? Whatever your passion is, whatever it is that is your issue, it is about doing something. And that is the heart of this idea of community organizing, is doing something. Standing by the wayside isn't gonna make any change. And so, hopefully we can take some of these clear ways to stand together, work alongside and one another as brothers and sisters in the work. And I think some of that is in the DNA of this city itself. So if you haven't done so already and want to find out a little bit more about Redefine Ed as well, we do have our social media, so follow us. We'll be posting updates and different things that we're going to be involved in. We have newsletters, read our communications. If you really want to talk to us further, you can email us at info@redefineedatlanta.org. Set up a personal meeting. Get to know who we are. We want to get to know who you are. And possibly there's some synergy to really listen and learn together and see what we can do to support one another. This work also doesn't happen without resources. So whether it's through us, whether it's through any of these organizations, or really all these other community organizations all around the city, people do need financing and funding. The number 2% really struck me. And if that is in fact true,
it is.
Well, that I should say that is in fact true.
And CRP as a song group.
And so there's a reason why, right? Like there's a reason why this work is hard, and we expect so much for the people who are on the ground too often to volunteer of their time, when their time, to be quite honest, is more valuable than my time. Right? I can sit here talking to you all today. I'm sitting here. We had good food. We're able to do this, and we're not trying to get to work with a broken arm. Like some people's time is more valuable than our time, and too often we ask people to volunteer their time to do that great work. And so, finally, just the last thing I'll say before we go is just continue this conversation, and once again, across lines of difference, because I think that when we only have this conversation in silos, that the work doesn't really get anywhere. It really requires us to get to know one another, build relationships, build bridges. And so please, if your circle is narrow, broaden it. If your circle is broad, invite more people to the circle, right? And just keep bringing this work forward. Finally, just some thank yous. So thank you so much to Wells Fargo for your sponsorship. Thank you, Chris Christie. Thank you to the Redefine Ed staff and board for all the hard work of putting this all together. Thank you to the gathering spots, to the sound crew, to all the folks Ayana in the back, who's the coordinator of making sure that this space is set up for you all. To the moderator, to our panelists, and to Kofi, thank you for flying from Chicago to be here and to lend your voice to this work here in Atlanta. We do really appreciate that. Please give them another round of applause. And finally, just what I want is for you to give a warm round of applause to yourselves for being here tonight, for being part of the conversation, and just on the front end, just speaking it into existence. Thank you so much for doing something. Thank you for coming here. We appreciate you, we love you, and we look forward to transforming the city together. Thank you. Have a great night.